Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Monday, May 22nd, and Flapper and I are over here at one of the local parks and just enjoying the day. It's a beautiful spring day. Temperature's around 80, and you can see the puffy white clouds, and we're over here by one of the ball fields, and Flapper, say hi to the folks. Flapper says hi to all his fans. But today, I'm spinning you around. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about some stuff I got to do to the van, and the van's going to need a little bit of maintenance love, and you know, it's 32 years old and things happen to 32-year-old vehicles, so it's got some stuff that's going to have to be done to it. But then of course I got the hitch and the giddy up. My surgery's going to be here in a couple of days, and I'm trying real hard not to stress over that, but being me, I am stressing a little bit. So I'm not going to be able to work on it for a little while, but let me tell you what it needs, what's got to be done. There's a whole list of stuff, and probably the first one is it's due for an oil change, and that's no big deal. I do that myself, and I just do it there in the driveway, and it doesn't take very long. I try to change oil in this thing every 3,000 miles because it's an old motor, and it's run a little bit longer than that now with this last trip I made. But you know, that's a minor thing. The thing that's really the serious thing, if you will, is I've had a little issue with the brake caliper on the right front brake sticking. Now, if you remember watching my Crazy Town videos here a while back, I had a problem with that sticking on the way into Crazy Town, which was kind of funny because I wasn't even going downhill, I was going uphill. And so it loosened itself up, and I figured I'd wait till it did it again. Well, on my trip over there to Prescott and up to visit the bridges and Perkinsville and all that stuff that I showed you the videos on, well, I got all the way around that loop and all that dirt road and everything, and I didn't have any problem. And then the darn thing stuck coming down the hill out of Jerome, coming down from Jerome into Clarkdale. Well, I pulled over. Fortunately, there wasn't much traffic, and I pulled over to a wide spot and stomped on the brakes real hard a couple of times, and I got it to release. Well, then coming through Cottonwood, the darn thing did it again. And that time it was pulling real hard to the right, and of course naturally building up heat, and I had to steer against it. And I actually went into a grocery store parking lot there right in Cottonwood and crawled underneath there and pounded on it with a hammer a little bit and got it to release, and managed to drive it the rest of the way home that way. But I'm going to have to put a brake caliper on it, and of course when you do brake calipers, you know, you don't do one, you got to do them both, and they're relatively expensive, and as long as I'm going to do that, I might as well put brakes on it. And I'm a little bit afraid that the rotors are going to be worn down too much, that I'm not going to be able to turn the rotors, which means I got to put rotors on it. And the rotors are in this thing where the bearings are at. So there's it's one of those things that just builds. One thing builds on another. And so I really don't have the cash to do that right now, but I'm going to probably have to do that before I take it any long trip, because if that brake rotor decides to actually lock up, it's going to leave me stranded somewhere, and I certainly don't need that to happen. There's a couple other little things it's got. It's got a couple exhaust leaks, and one of them is on the right exhaust manifold. And those of you that don't know about the Ford Windsor Series engines, they started building those in the early 60s and built them right up through the mid-90s. And they built millions of them. And one of the issues that they have is that the exhaust manifolds on them have a tendency to crack, and when they crack, they'll leak a little bit, and it's usually on one cylinder, and so it makes like a little pop 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 sound when it's running, and that's what this one's doing. So I don't know if I got a broken manifold. I don't know if it's come loose. I don't imagine it's probably come loose, but it could be warped or something. I don't know. When they first put these motors together, they don't even put gaskets in them. They put the manifold right up on them, right up against the head. And so they're kind of prone to exhaust leaks. And the other thing that happens to them is that in a constant, over years and years and years of constant heating and cooling cycles, the manifolds actually shrink a little bit. And when they shrink a little bit, they come up against the bolts, and they'll do one of two things. They'll either crack the manifold, which is the reason why they crack, which I was talking about, or they'll actually shear the bolts off. And so every once in a while you get into one of these Windsor Series engines, and you'll find out that one or more of the exhaust manifold bolts have actually been sheared off because it pulls so hard against the side of it, actually breaks the bolt. This one actually had that when I tore it apart. Actually, no, excuse me, this was my other truck. My other truck has the same motor, my old white hot rod truck. And that one there, the manifold was shrunk up so much I couldn't even make it fit. I ended up having to replace it. And that's what I probably should have done to this one too, because I had some issues with this one. So anyway, I got to pull the doghouse out. It's actually fairly easy to get to on these. You got to pull the passenger seat out, which is only 4 bolts, and then you got to pull the doghouse over the motor, and then you can get the whole back of the motor. So it's just something that takes a little bit of time, and you know, right after my surgery, I'm not going to be able to do that for a while. Another thing I got is I've got the other exhaust leak is back on the tailpipe, and if I was going to do it right, I really should replace the tailpipe, but that's not available anymore on one of these, and you can take it to a custom shop and have a custom one made, but I don't know if there's anybody in this town that does that. I'd have to take it down to the big city to do that. And so, but I can wrap a little bit of muffler wrap or exhaust pipe wrap around it maybe, and put a couple clamps on it to make a temporary fix. And you know, that's not the right way to do it, but that's probably the way I'll end up doing it. So that's a couple things. Got a little smell of gas leak here somewhere. I think I know what it is. I don't think it's a hazard, but I need to find it and make sure and fix it. It's once again, these Windsor motors have a little flexible line that goes on from the fuel rail on the left bank to the fuel rail on the right bank. And over years and years and years, they've got a little plastic thing that allows it to flex, and that plastic gets brittle, and eventually they fail and cause a lot of engine fires in these things actually. And mine, it actually did break, and I caught it. And so I replaced it with a little bit of fuel hose. And so that's, I got to check that and make sure it's okay, make sure that's not leaking, but I'll do that while the doghouse is apart. And just, you know, just little things that pile onto each other. And I got the weather stripping in the doors. I'm going to show you that, because that's right here. Let me pan around here. Go ahead and shut my door. But if you look right here, you can see this is all cracked right in here. Well, what that does is it lets rainwater run down inside the door. And when it lets the rainwater run down inside the door, of course, it can rust out the bottom of the door. And I've never pulled this apart to make sure that's not a problem, but those weather stripping, they're bad on both sides, and I wouldn't doubt if I had some issues down inside the door. So I need to check on that. That's another thing. I put an aftermarket stereo in this thing when I first started building it, and the aftermarket stereo, let's come back around where I can talk to you. The aftermarket stereo didn't want to talk to the speakers in the door, and the reason why it didn't like the Ford wiring harness. And the reason why that is that the Ford wiring harness has a hot lead to each speaker in the door, but the grounds are common. And well, the aftermarket stereo didn't like that, and it wouldn't work for that, so I put a little set of temporary speakers in it, and a temporary sometimes has a tendency to become permanent. So while I got the door panels off, checking for rust inside the doors, I'm going to need to figure out a way to run new wires over to those speakers and fix it the way it really should be. It's, you know, it's been 6-7 years now that I've been using this van just the way it is, but that speaker system that I've got is kind of a cobbled together thing, and it doesn't sound bad, but it's really not the way it ought to be, so I ought to probably fix it right. But that's basically a rundown of the things I got to do to it, and none of them is real complicated, but they take a little bit of time. The front brake thing is going to be the most expensive, and that depends on how much I have to get into it and what I all have to do to it. I already put a couple years ago, I went ahead and pulled the front wheels off and repacked the bearings and all that kind of stuff, because it probably never been done before. And the bearings, fortunately, were all in good shape. But if I have to replace the front rotors, the rotors come as a hub assembly. They don't come separate like the new cars do, and so you got to replace the whole front hub, and the wheel studs and the front bearings, and the whole schmear has to be transferred over. So it's a lot more complicated than it sounds like it would be. So I rebuilt the back brakes here, a year ago, I guess. I had a little noise in the back brakes. I pulled them apart and found out that the spring assembly had self-destructed in there and that the wheel cylinders were leaking and all that. And so I did the whole thing in the back. I was able to save the drums. They were okay, but I put all new, brake shoes and the wheel cylinders and the small part, what they call a small parts kit, which is all of the springs and stuff. And redid all that, and I put a new master cylinder in it, and I flushed the brake fluid system. I can do all that. I've got all the tools to do it. It's just the time and effort, and of course I'm going to have to wait till I'm physically able to do that again. So I probably won't be taking this out on any big trips until I at least get the brake thing fixed. But old vehicles are, always having to work on something, and I got a whole list of stuff on my old hot rod truck, and I'll make a video one of these days and tell you about it. But for right now, it's probably long enough on this one. So I'm going to spin you around one more time so Flapjack can say goodbye. Flapper, say hi to all your fans. Say hi to all your fans, big boy. And we'll catch you on another one. Like I always tell you, take care of each other, love each other. One more look at that big, beautiful sky today. And for right now, I'll just tell you peace out.